After Alexander's first love returned to the country, I changed from his legitimate girlfriend to a mistress. I didn't cry or make a fuss. Instead, I secretly planned something big. When we met again, it was like a huge battlefield. With red eyes, he rushed towards me like a mad dog. Aurelia, please don't leave me. I let him go crazy, hold me tightly, and try his best to blend me into his body as if his life depended on it. But I remained unmoved and silently counted down the 3 seconds in my heart before leaving. In the private room, someone teased Alexander. Brother Alexander, you've been waiting for so many years, and finally Serafina has come back from abroad. Everyone knows that you two are a perfect match. When are you planning to propose to Serafina? A touch of tenderness flashed across Alexander's proud look. 3 days from now is Serafina's birthday. I'm planning to propose to her on that day and give her a big surprise. Everyone, come and cheer me on. Those buddies let out waves of cheers. One of them, who liked to stir up trouble, asked Alexander, what about Aurelia? Brother Alexander, how do you plan to deal with her? Standing at the door, I held back my tears that were about to burst out, calmed myself down, even slowed down my breathing, and yet couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope in my heart. Alexander shook the hand holding the wine glass. Serafina's not in good health and can't bear too much strain in bed. Doesn't Aurelia want money? Then let her endure it. Brother Alexander, how does it feel to be with the former Miss Aurelia? Alexander snorted coldly, want to know? When I'm tired of her, I'll let you have a go. At that moment, I felt as if I had fallen into an ice cellar, couldn't stop shivering, turned around with my staggering body. The other voices in the private room gradually faded away, and all kinds of slanderous words about me kept ringing in my ears. I knew that Serafina had come back. That day, he received a phone call and rushed to the airport in a hurry, leaving me behind when I was suffering from acute gastroenteritis. I endured the pain of cramps and took a taxi to the hospital by myself, staying there for an intravenous drip until midnight. When I opened my WeChat moments, I saw a picture of him and Serafina hugging each other, with the caption, no matter how many years have passed, as long as I turn around, you'll always be there. Since that night, he often didn't come back. Just a phone call or a text message could call him away. I knew that this was Serafina showing off to me. 2 hours ago, Alexander's special assistant, Mr. Dong, said that he couldn't pick up Alexander who was out for socializing and asked me to go instead. I still got out of my warm bed without hesitation as usual and rushed over in a hurry. Unexpectedly, I heard his true thoughts. Huh? I weakly hugged myself and leaned against the corner, buried my head, and let my tears flow freely. The sound of my mobile phone vibrating rang out. Alexander's somewhat impatient voice came over, are you here yet? Where's the car parked? I suppressed my hoarse sobs and took a deep breath. In parking lot B. I hung up the phone before Alexander did. Alexander looked at his phone, frowned, and waved goodbye to those cronies. On the way back, we hardly talked. Alexander endured a headache and said, what's wrong? Are you unhappy that I drank with them? I've already said, no. I didn't want to hear his explanations. His explanations were always the same, and I was tired of them. My nose kept feeling sour. I didn't want him to notice anything unusual, nor did I want to hysterically question him. What was our relationship now? He was about to propose to Serafina, but still wasn't willing to give me an explanation until now. What did he think of me? A slave in bed? Someone who could be easily dismissed with money? I used to be the eldest daughter of the Aurelia family, the richest in Haicheng. When the Aurelia family went bankrupt, I fell from a high position to the bottom overnight. Since I was a child, my mother taught me that women should respect and love themselves. Even though I was no longer the high and mighty Miss Aurelia, my self-esteem and pride couldn't bear being trampled on like this. I always thought that the man who rushed to save me and said he would protect me when my family went bankrupt and I was at my lowest point really cared about me and liked me for who I was. It turned out that this was how he thought of me. Alexander hiccuped from drinking and leaned against the window sideways. The moment the hiccup came out, I felt extremely disgusted and my heart was chilled to the bone. When we got home, I threw the key away and said, Aunt Wang, prepare some hangover soup for President Alexander. I'm sleepy and going to bed. After saying that, I didn't even give Alexander a glance and went upstairs by myself. Alexander was stunned on the spot, and his anger began to rise. Isn't it normal for men to have social engagements? You're just too quick to get angry. I didn't sleep in my own room but went to the guest room and locked the door behind me. I kept staring at the door until 3 o'clock in the morning. Finally, I couldn't help laughing. What was I still expecting? I touched the bead string on my wrist. Hello, I'm the daughter of host number 10011. I apply to leave this world. On the day the Aurelia family went bankrupt, my mother disappeared. Many people said that my mother didn't want to live a hard life with my father, so she left. But I knew that wasn't the case. It was because my father had a mistress outside and had an illegitimate child. Unable to bear the betrayal, my mother left me this bracelet and left this world. My mother said, Aurelia, if the person you love betrays you in the future, come to me. The system will bring you to my side. The system gave me 3 days to say goodbye to this world properly. That night, I cried until dawn. At 5 o'clock in the morning, I received a call from the prison. Patrick was dead. At that moment, my heart, which was already numb from pain, didn't feel anything about his death. On the first day of the countdown to leaving, I buried the last relative in this world. I calmly went to sign various documents. Patrick had aged a lot. I hadn't seen him for 2 years. His calm face was full of wrinkles, and his hair had turned gray. At just over 50 years old, he looked even older than a 70-year-old man. In front of the freezer, I made my final confession to him. The son you wanted to carry on the family line didn't come. It's a pity that I'm the one seeing you off. Well, it's also considered fulfilling the bond between us as father and daughter. Patrick, have you ever regretted it? I regret betraying your mother, helping others succeed, and almost making my own daughter become the plaything of the rich. I raised my head and didn't let the tears in the corners of my eyes fall. He wasn't worth a single tear from me. After Patrick was cremated, I buried him in the nearby cemetery. A heavy rainstorm began to fall. I held a black umbrella and stopped in front of his tombstone. I'm also ready to leave. After this farewell, we'll never see each other again. I'll continue to live with my mother. What do you mean by living together? Alexander didn't know when he appeared behind me. He bowed towards Patrick and then put his arm around my shoulder with concern. Such a big thing happened. Why didn't you tell me? The warmth of his body made me feel dazed for a moment. I thought you didn't want to see him. After all, Patrick had used many underhanded means in business before and had seriously harmed Alexander, causing him heavy losses. He's dead. Besides, he's your father. I should accompany you no matter what. Is there anything else I can help with? I shook my head. Enough. You've already done a lot for me. I won't ask for anything more. Alexander looked at my indifferent eyes, and a sense of panic surged in his heart. Had Aurelia discovered something? Before Patrick went to prison, his mistress and son had calculated all his debts and put them on my head. I was pushed into a corner by the creditors at that time, and it was Alexander who stepped in to solve the problem. So that's why he thought I was just after money, right? When I looked at him again, there was no warmth in my eyes. I'll take you back first. His phone rang at this moment. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the name, Serafina. I held the black umbrella and put on a proper yet distant smile. You have something to do. Go ahead. I want to take a walk by myself. In the pouring rain, Alexander's luxury car didn't stop in front of me for a second, splashing up a string of water and driving away without looking back. As long as Serafina said a word or even sent an emoji, he would rush to her without hesitation. I was left behind again. There was no one left in this world who had a family bond with me. It seemed that the only person I could say goodbye to was Alexander. At this time, my phone rang. Aunt Wang said that someone had sent me a big package. There was only an address on it but no sender. After I opened it, I saw a thick stack of documents and a USB flash drive. It took me nearly 2 hours to read through the contents of those documents and the USB flash drive. The sender just wanted to tell me one thing: Alexander was the mastermind behind the downfall of the Aurelia family. Alexander had joined forces with Patrick's mistress, Veronica, to bring down the Aurelia family. It was Alexander who deliberately made those debt collectors keep pressing me, making me fall into his trap so that he could play the hero to save the beauty. Everything was calculated by him. A big hand seemed to grip my heart tightly, making me feel suffocated with pain. I stumbled into the bathroom and retched weakly. I fell to the ground. Why? Why are you doing this to me? What have I done wrong? I wasn't the one who drove Serafina away back then. Are you holding a grudge against me because of this? I screamed at the empty room with all my strength, but the only response was the strange and ferocious face in the mirror. Beep. My phone vibrated. Alexander, I'll be busy these 2 days and won't be coming back. I curled my lips, my voice hoarse, busy proposing to her. Do you know why she left you and went abroad back then? Alexander. Haha. In the end, I didn't reply at all. No one knew how long I had been curled up crying in that small bathroom. When I woke up again, I was already in the hospital. Aunt Wang found that I was in a coma due to a high fever and quickly called an ambulance. When I woke up again, it was already the next day. The doctor told me to be careful because it wasn't good to use medicine now since I was pregnant. Hearing this news, I subconsciously touched my belly. Alexander had once fantasized about whether our child would look more like me or him. When we first got together, he couldn't wait to plan all the things that would happen to us in the future at once. The sweetness in the past now seemed so ridiculous and ironic. Because I hadn't eaten or slept well in the past 2 days, the doctor said that I was in poor health and might not be able to keep the baby if this continued. Aunt Wang, the nanny, couldn't bear it and called Alexander. Hello? President Alexander, Aurelia. There was a burst of Serafina's rapid coughing on the other end of the phone. Alexander, it seems that your nanny's phone was accidentally pressed by me. If there's something going on at home, you can go back first. What are you talking about? Your business is the most important thing. Hello, Aunt Wang, you can handle the things at home by yourself. After saying that, he hung up the phone. Aunt Wang's mobile phone was an old-fashioned one. Even without putting it on speakerphone, I could clearly hear the voices on the other end. Aunt Wang looked at me a bit awkwardly. It's okay, Aunt Wang. You can go back first. I want to be alone. Aunt Wang couldn't persuade me and left with a sigh. On the way to get an intravenous drip, I unexpectedly saw Alexander putting his arm around Serafina and walking towards the information desk. They were asking which floor the gynecology clinic was on. Alexander gently put his big hand on Serafina's hand. And Serafina's hand was on her own belly. At that moment, I felt dizzy, still unwilling to give up. I followed them until Alexander's happy laughter filled the whole department. My heart ached so much that I fainted again. When I woke up, I was still in the cold hospital ward, with an intravenous drip in my hand. The only person by my side was Aunt Wang. Aunt Wang, they have a child. What about my child? What should I do with my child? Aunt Wang was stunned when she heard this, looked at me sympathetically, with her eyes full of heartache. At this moment, any comforting words seemed so powerless. Aunt Wang, did I do something wrong? Silly girl, how could it be your fault? Aunt Wang couldn't help feeling heartbroken and tears fell down. She covered up her guilt while wiping her tears. It's not my fault. I kept murmuring this sentence and finally, my chaotic mind calmed down. Yes, it's not my fault. Why should I bear all the bitter consequences? I originally just wanted to leave quietly, but Alexander and Serafina had gone too far. A strong sense of unwillingness and resentment filled my whole chest. Before leaving, I definitely wouldn't let this pair of scoundrels live too comfortably. Aunt Wang, please help me do a few things. On the second day of the countdown to leaving, I was determined to take revenge. I cleared away all the things related to me in the villa. I used all my savings to hire a team of lawyers. I carefully analyzed the evidence of Alexander and Veronica's conspiracy to bankrupt the Aurelia family in that box and solidified sufficient evidence of Alexander's malicious business competition and frame-up. The moment I handed these evidences to the police, I felt surprisingly calm. Returning to the hotel alone, Alexander actually called me. I hung up the phone. Then I turned it off. Don't worry. I'll show up at your proposal scene tomorrow. I'll give you a big gift. 18 hours left in the countdown to leaving. I went to Alexander's ancestral home and met Alexander's mother. What are you doing here? Helena didn't like Aurelia at all and had never acknowledged her. Before the Aurelia family went bankrupt, she thought Aurelia was worthy of her son, but now? She didn't even think Aurelia was fit to carry his shoes. I have a gift for you, Aunt Helena. I opened my phone, and there were warm pictures of Lawrence with his mistress and their child together on it. Helena's face turned green with anger. What do you mean? Are you deliberately trying to humiliate me? I chuckled softly. Aunt Helena, you've misunderstood. I can tell you the address of this woman, and I can also give you the records of Uncle Lawrence secretly transferring the couple's property over the years. However, I have one condition, which is just a piece of cake for you. Helena wasn't so easily tricked. Can't I investigate by myself? Isn't it normal for a man to have a woman outside? Hearing this, I laughed mockingly. I really underestimated your magnanimity, Aunt Helena. You're even willing to accept Uncle Lawrence's illegitimate child. You can go and check, but I guarantee that you won't find anything, because... I deliberately kept Helena in suspense, stood up, and looked at her sympathetically. Because your dear son has already covered up everything. He's cleaning up his father's mess. What? Helena stood up in shock and didn't even care about the pain when she bumped into the corner of the table. That's exactly what you heard. This property details in my hand is the only piece of evidence. I forgot to tell you that Alexander once took me to her place, and he said that his stepmother's cooking was really good. For a wealthy lady, if her husband's heart isn't at home and even her son isn't on her side, her position will be in jeopardy. After dropping this bombshell, I turned around and left without looking back. I silently counted to 3 in my heart. 3, 2. Before I reached 1, I was grabbed by Helena. It worked. What exactly do you want? I curled up the corners of my lips with satisfaction. Nothing much, just some chat records and transfer records. 12 hours left in the countdown to leave, and I had a new discovery. I stood by the window of the hotel where Alexander would propose today, looking at the lawn below. Quite a number of romantic bouquets, balloons, and light strips had already been arranged on the lawn. There was also a large poster of an intimate photo of Alexander and Serafina on it. So it turns out that you don't dislike taking pictures. You just don't like taking pictures with me. And you're not allergic to lilies? Because that's Serafina's favorite flower. Ha ha ha. In the quiet room, I felt that staying in this world for one more second was like torture. Just as I was immersed in my own sadness, a fierce quarrel suddenly broke out outside the door. If you don't divorce that old hag, I'll take the child in my belly and accept Alexander's proposal tomorrow. By then, he won't call you dad but grandpa. I suddenly opened my eyes wide. TSK. How explosive. I turned on the voice recorder on my phone, pressed it against the door, and successfully recorded the content I wanted. I also saw an unexpected man through the peephole. Lawrence. I couldn't believe it and confirmed it several times. Yes, it was indeed Lawrence. Alexander's father. Was the child in Serafina's belly Lawrence's? How thrilling. Then why did Lawrence agree to let Alexander and Serafina date? I didn't have the mood to think about their bloody love triangle plot. After days of planning, I was already exhausted physically and mentally. After setting the alarm clock, I curled up under the quilt. 6 hours left in the countdown to leave. Aunt Wang encouraged me not to leave any regrets. Aunt Wang also brought me some stew. Aurelia, come onorevole. Drink this soup while it's hot. I've also warmed up some noodles for you. It can warm your stomach. I looked at her gratefully, took out the bank card from my bag and pushed it over. After today, Aunt Wang, you probably won't be able to continue working at the Lawrence family. I'm sorry for dragging you down. Please take it. Aunt Wang pushed the bank card back and patted my shoulder, saying earnestly, Aurelia, you'll be raising the child alone in the future and you'll need money in many aspects. I can't take this money. Besides, I just helped you pack your things. I didn't really help you much. I ate the warm noodle soup, listening to her heartwarming words, and my tears kept falling like a broken string. Aunt Wang sighed again, while helping me tidy up the room. She kept comforting me. I hope your future life will be smoother. My tears fell even more fiercely. Don't cry. Do whatever you want to do. At least you won't leave with regrets. I nodded vigorously and said with a choked voice, Aunt Wang, thank you for taking care of me in the past 2 years. You should also take good care of yourself. Aunt Wang left. 2 hours left in the countdown to leave, and the revenge began. I reviewed all the steps again, went downstairs, and walked into the control room. Hello, I'm a friend of President Alexander. President Alexander attaches great importance to this proposal. Later, I'll play a commemorative VCR, so could you let me use the computer for a while? The man looked at me for a while and didn't agree. At this time, my phone just rang, and it showed Alexander on it. I held up the phone to show him. The moment the call was connected, Alexander's anxious voice came over, Where are you? Why didn't you answer the phone? After knowing that she had taken all the things in the villa away, he suddenly felt an empty space in his heart. An unprecedented panic made him unable to sleep all night. But he stubbornly thought that he liked Serafina. The feeling of being needed by Serafina gave him a great sense of accomplishment. I'm here. My phone ran out of battery just now. Okay, I won't talk to you now. Aurelia, you. Come back here. After saying that, I hung up the phone, completely ignoring Alexander's continuous calls and setting my phone to silent mode. This is President Alexander's call. Do you want to check it to see if what I said is true? The man fiddled with his phone for a while, and soon dispelled his doubts. All right, when it's time to cut the cake, I'll leave the room to you. Thank you very much. More and more people came to the venue. Most of Alexander's so-called friends also arrived, and the birthday banquet began. Serafina walked out surrounded by people like the moon surrounded by stars. Alexander immediately took her into his arms, thoughtfully replaced the mixed drink with fruit juice for her, and blocked round after round of toasts for her. Just these little actions had already caused waves of cheers from many people. I remembered that at a previous banquet, Alexander clearly knew that I had acute gastroenteritis that day, but still persuaded me to drink a toast from the boss of a cooperation project. So the difference between love and non-love is so obvious. I closed the door of the control room. Now it was my time. Just when everyone was singing the birthday song for Serafina, the big screen began to scroll and play the voice messages of how Serafina asked Helena for money back then. Give me 10 million yuan, and I'll go abroad immediately and never contact your son in my life. Serafina's voice was very arrogant and carried a sense of complacency. Why don't you just rob me? Helena was so angry that she almost choked. Think it over. Alexander loves me. If I tell him to go east, he'll never go west. If you continue to target me, it will only make Alexander more dissatisfied with you, and he won't even come home then. Just with this, Helena was controlled by her. 5 million yuan. I can transfer it right away. 8 million yuan. Then a huge transfer record of 8 million yuan appeared on the screen. It was extremely eye-catching. Serafina's face changed drastically, and she quickly grabbed Alexander to explain, No, it's not true. Alexander, listen to me. Someone must have photoshopped this. The people around who were discussing animatedly were talking about the incident that Serafina left abroad without saying goodbye back then. The voice in the WeChat chat records can't be faked. That WeChat account belongs to Aunt Helena. And there's also the transfer record. Wasn't it Aurelia who drove Serafina away back then? Yes, that's what I heard too. Otherwise, how could Aurelia take her place later? I didn't expect Serafina to be such a person. Alexander took a long time to find his voice. He had always thought that he was deeply in love and felt sorry for their relationship that ended without a result back then. So when he knew she was back, he couldn't wait to find her and wanted to make up for her. So, you left me for money back then? Serafina shook her head like a rattle, looking at Alexander with teary eyes. She knew that as long as she showed weakness, Alexander would soften his heart. Alexander subconsciously reached out to wipe her tears away, but at the moment his hand just stretched out, an explosive recording rang out again. If you don't divorce that old hag, I'll take the child in my belly and accept Alexander's proposal tomorrow. By then, he won't call you dad but grandpa. You know that crazy woman Helena. She still holds shares of the Lawrence family. I have to coax her to cheat her out of the shares before I can divorce. Really? You're my baby. Would I lie to you? This was the conversation between Serafina and Lawrence when they quarreled in the hotel corridor last night. If Lawrence hadn't been careful and pulled Serafina into the room, I could have exposed her even more thoroughly. I saw the chaotic scene in the whole venue as I wished through the surveillance. Alexander's expression was as disgusting as if he had eaten a fly, which made me feel extremely relieved. He slapped Serafina hard, and his eyes were full of murderous intent. Bitch, how dare you play with me? Serafina panicked and crawled on the ground, begging for mercy constantly. Alexander, It's not true. Someone must be deliberately trying to harm me. Believe me, I love you. Love me? You took my mother's 8 million yuan and left me to go abroad. Do you love me or money? Huh? Alexander slapped her hard again. At this time, the door of the control room was banged loudly. 1 hour left in the countdown to leave. It was my turn to show up. What are you doing? You're going to get me killed. The person in charge of the control room angrily pointed at me. Don't worry. Alexander is too busy to take care of himself and won't come to trouble you. Half an hour ago, I sent the recording from last night to Helena, told her about Alexander's proposal to Serafina today, and thoughtfully sent her the location as well. They were confused, but they didn't want me, the culprit, to leave so easily either, because someone had to take the blame after all. I didn't care. Clap. 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 What a big drama. Father's father is father. How interesting. How really interesting. As soon as I said these words, some of Alexander's so-called friends also sneered. When Alexander saw me appear, a hint of panic flashed across his eyes. You? Why are you here? There was no expression on my face, and my tone was very calm. Didn't you say you had something to do at the company and would be at the company for the past 2 days? So this is to celebrate Miss Serafina's birthday. I walked to the birthday cake, took a diamond ring from in front of a bouquet of red roses. No, it's a proposal. It's quite nice. Serafina, you've always said that I'm the third party who got between you and Alexander, and made me bear the blame for so many years. What about you? You spent all the money and came back to hook up with Alexander again. But you're the real habitual mistress, the mistress of Lawrence and Helena, and the mistress between me and Alexander. My voice gradually rose, and I made sure that everyone could hear me word by word. Then I angrily threw the diamond ring at Serafina, tore off her disguise, and vented my resentment for carrying the blame for these years. Everyone started whispering again because of my words. Serafina is really shameless. She's having affairs with both the old and the young. She's clearly eyeing the Lawrence family's property. That's right. Aurelia is really pitiful. She's been misunderstood for so many years. Alexander is also a scumbag. He deserves to be cheated on. Haha, the father and son are cheating on each other. What a rare sight. Even those who usually only recognized Serafina as Alexander's official match now also thought that Serafina was disgraceful. Alexander roared, "Shut up. All of you shut up. Assistant Dong, check. Immediately check who deliberately exposed these things." Serafina, who was lying on the ground, quickly came to her senses and angrily pointed at me. I know. You did all of this today. Aren't you just trying to keep Alexander? But he doesn't love you at all. The one who isn't loved is the third party. Helena happened to arrive when she heard this and lost her temper completely. She grabbed Serafina's hair and tore it crazily. Bitch, you're so shameless to be a mistress. I should have told Alexander about your vain face earlier, and then he wouldn't have been kept in the dark and continued to be harmed by you. Alexander's scrutinizing gaze fell on me. Did you do all of this today? I also went all out and shook my finger. These? No. There's more. Alexander looked at me as if I were a stranger. You took all your things away and didn't answer my phone calls. Was it all to take revenge on me? What's the good for you to ruin me? I tried hard to curl up the corners of my lips and pulled out a smile. Ruining you? I can avenge the Aurelia family. and I can also avenge the child in my belly. When you took her to the obstetrics and gynecology department for an examination, did you ever think about the child in my belly? Alexander shuddered all over, and only felt that his eyes were so dry that it hurt. You know? He suddenly remembered the call from Aunt Wang. At that time, he was accompanying the coughing Serafina to the hospital for an examination. So Aurelia was also at the hospital at that time? His pupils dilated, and he cautiously tried to speak, his voice seeming to be stuck in his throat, sour and unpleasant. We have a child? I raised my head proudly, and a crystal tear slid down from the corner of my eye. He has nothing to do with you. When Aunt Wang called you, you were with Serafina. After I dealt with my father's funeral, you left me at the cemetery and were still with Serafina. Have you forgotten all these? Do you think this child would want to see a cold and heartless father like you? Everyone couldn't help sighing. Alexander staggered back 2 steps. The sharp words made his face turn as pale as paper, his fingers were pinched until they turned white, and his eyes were full of remorse. Helena heard this and hit Serafina even harder. Okay, you bitch. You made me lose my grandson. I'll make you pay for it today. I looked at Alexander's expression with great satisfaction, but there was no sense of pleasure in my heart. 15 minutes left in the countdown to leave. The people who came to arrest Alexander arrived. Alexander, we are from the Economic Investigation Department of the Municipal Bureau. We suspect that you are involved in malicious business competition, disrupting the market, and framing others. Please come with us. Helena, who was fighting with Serafina, immediately rushed out and blocked in front of Alexander. What are you doing? My son is a good citizen and pays so much tax every year. Why are you arresting my son? The police said righteously, please don't interfere with official duties. Veronica has already confessed everything. Alexander colluded with Veronica to deliberately create incidents to suppress the stock price of the Patrick family, seriously damaging the interests of the vast number of shareholders and causing extremely bad social impacts. We have conclusive evidence for all the accusations against Alexander. Take him away. No, don't. Let go of my son. Alexander was completely stunned. He subconsciously looked at me. Aurelia, the 3 words, I'm sorry, somehow became so hard to say. Lawrence knew what was happening here and rushed over quickly. He shouted loudly, I'd like to see who dares to touch my son. For all your accusations, Alexander has his own lawyer, and he will be fully responsible for these matters. You can communicate with him. Lawrence even brought the lawyer. I recognized that lawyer. He was a notorious lawyer who specialized in helping the powerful and wealthy get acquitted. As long as he was paid enough money, he could always win the lawsuit by taking advantage of tiny loopholes. If he was allowed to handle it, I'm afraid that in the case of the Aurelia family, the blame would eventually fall on Veronica, and Alexander would be easily acquitted by this lawyer who would play down the serious issues. 10 minutes left in the countdown to leave. The battlefield suddenly changed. I really didn't expect Lawrence to come so quickly. If he mediated, Alexander probably wouldn't suffer much and might even be acquitted. Just as I was thinking of a way to deal with it, someone broke the current situation. Lawrence, don't be complacent. You're in trouble yourself. Aunt Wang's voice suddenly rang out in the venue. I stared at her in astonishment, as well as at the other mistress of Lawrence beside her, the woman whom Alexander called stepmother. Aunt Wang looked at me apologetically. I'm sorry, Aurelia. I took advantage of you. I deliberately sent you that package. I just wanted to use your hands to expose the dark secrets of the Lawrence family. Lawrence also brought ruin to my Zhao family. This is my poor daughter, Aunt. In order to take revenge, she had to change her name to Isabella and stay by Lawrence's side without any proper status. We mother and daughter had been lying low for 3 years and collected incriminating evidence that could send him to prison for life. He deliberately shorted the stocks of Isabella's family's company, forcing my husband, Zhao Chengmin, to jump off the building and commit suicide. He also hired thugs to seriously injure my son, Zhao Huiqing. We had no money for medical treatment, and he died in that damp and dark rental house like that. I hate them. I wish I could kill all the members of the Lawrence family. Aunt Wang's words, like a bolt from the blue, shocked everyone. The police from the Economic Investigation Department immediately called their fellow departments to come and assist in the investigation. I looked at Lawrence and Alexander in even greater disbelief. What a father-son pair of the Lawrence family. Truly like father, like son. Alexander shook his head. No, I didn't know what my father had done, and I didn't completely wipe out the Aurelia family. If the Aurelia family hadn't fallen, you wouldn't have even looked at me. Only by annexing the Aurelia family and making the Lawrence family stronger would you have noticed me. Haha, how ridiculous. It's as if you had a secret crush on me long ago? Don't force your ambition and pride onto this. It makes me sick. I tried hard to suppress the surging morning sickness and was extremely disgusted in my heart. Alexander growled painfully, bitterness spreading in his mouth, his voice hoarse. No, I had noticed you since college. But you never took me seriously. That's why I was with Serafina. Hearing this, Serafina completely broke down. No, I was the one you liked first. Why is it her? She's just something to comfort you during your single period. Alexander slapped her backhandedly. No, Aurelia is my true love. He should have realized it earlier. Otherwise, after Serafina returned to the country, he wouldn't have been reluctant to let Aurelia leave even if it meant imprisoning her. He wanted to keep her by his side. 5 minutes left in the countdown to leave. I really didn't want to argue with them anymore. I leaned wearily against the long table, and a sense of exhaustion welled up at this moment. Only Aunt Wang noticed that something was wrong with me. Aurelia, are you okay? I waved my hand. Lawrence, who had come to his senses, pointed at Isabella. Are you Zhao Qingmin's daughter? What about Tianfeng? Isabella burst out laughing. You've sown your wild oats everywhere. Of course, you don't know how many illegitimate children you have outside. I just got a posthumous child from those poor women you abandoned. That woman was beaten by you and Helena until she had a miscarriage. Comrade police, I want to report Lawrence anonymously for hiring killers, intentionally hurting people, shorting the stock market, and disrupting the market. I have solid evidence here. The whole venue was in an uproar. 3 minutes left in the countdown to leave. The farce of the Lawrence family was finally coming to an end. I really couldn't hold on any longer. I hunched over and started vomiting. Aunt Wang was extremely worried. Aurelia, you're too weak. The baby, Aunt Wang. I interrupted the words that Aunt Wang almost blurted out. Alexander heard it and rushed over in one stride, his eyes bright. Aurelia, our baby is still here, right? Helena also came over to help with a look of surprise on her face. Aurelia, dear child, Mom will take good care of you. How shameless. My baby has nothing to do with your Lawrence family. Aunt Wang helped me push Helena away. Get lost. Alexander rushed over again. This time, not only Aunt Wang but also those onlookers who couldn't stand it anymore stopped him. Among them was the person in charge of the control room. I looked at them gratefully. The timer in my mind started reminding me again. Everything was coming to an end. 2 minutes left in the countdown to leave. Alexander seemed to go crazy. Aurelia, Aurelia. Alexander kept trying to break through the crowd and grab me. His red eyes and crazy look were really terrifying. I don't know where he got the strength from. 5 big men and 2 policemen couldn't stop him. 1 minute left in the countdown to leave. I was caught by Alexander. I didn't dodge. Alexander's hands were like pincers, gripping my arm. He stared at me affectionately. Aurelia, let's give birth to the baby, start anew, and live a good life together, okay? I smiled and gave him a decent farewell. Alexander, you don't have a chance. In this life, we'll never see each other again, whether dead or alive. After saying that, my body started to become Shuwu bit by bit. Aunt Wang, don't blame yourself. Thank you. The final 10-second countdown. Alexander was swept by great grief and panic. He roared like a wild beast with all his might. No, Aurelia, you can't leave me. Aurelia. Alexander held me tightly in his arms, calling my name over and over again, begging me not to leave. 3, 2, 1. Alexander spat out a mouthful of blood, which splattered on my forehead. Goodbye, this world. 3 days later, in the western suburb cemetery. Aunt Wang and Isabella, dressed in black, laid flowers on Aurelia's tombstone. Aurelia, Aunt Wang doesn't know where you've gone, but I know you'll surely live a better life than before. The Lawrence family has been sentenced. Lawrence was sentenced to 12 years in prison. Alexander was sentenced to 5 years in prison. The once dazzling Lawrence family group has long been divided up by other companies. Serafina was beaten by Helena until she had a miscarriage. She also had several miscarriages abroad, and her uterine wall is already very thin. It's almost impossible for her to get pregnant again. Alexander went crazy even before he entered prison. He kept calling your name. The doctor said that he was under too much stimulation and was sent to a mental hospital. He'll spend the rest of his life there. The wealth, power, and you that he tried so hard to calculate and obtain have all come to nothing. We're leaving here. We've come to say goodbye to you. A gentle breeze blew, and the flower branches on the grave trembled. I know.